As if you've been with us over the last little while, you know I'm doing a series on vineyard values. So the things that have, since the beginning, I suppose, of the vineyard movement have been close to our hearts and what makes us tick. And it's our values that drive what we want to do and our priorities, what we spend our time and money and so on. And so far we've looked at initially the centred set, bounded set model, and said that we are a centred set model, so we don't have barriers and we're trying to draw people in. Then we looked at the Bible and the way that we value the Bible and the way that we want to use the Bible in a certain way. Then last time we looked at the headship of Jesus and the presence of the Spirit and how important that is to us as a church. And this morning we're going to look at relationships and how we value relationship. The Vineyard has always been a very relational movement. We like doing things together, hanging out together, getting to know each other, developing friendship, and building community. And that's, again, one of our priorities. We want to do that. We want to build community together. We believe that Christianity is really, first and foremost, relational. It's about a relationship, both with, firstly, of course, with the Trinity, Father, Son and Spirit, and then also with one another as we walk together as a family of fellow believers. So it's not first and foremost about buildings. Buildings are important, but church is not buildings, and we don't have one, so it's, I can say that easily, well, except what we rent. But it's not about buildings, it's not about creating an event. Some churches like to do kind of an event. That's all about all of what it is. And, we want to do things as well as we can and be as relevant as we can and bless people, but it's not per se about creating an event to go to. It's not about, first and foremost, experiences, although we want to, and we value experiencing God and the presence of the Spirit, but it's not first and foremost about a culture of just where's the next experience. It's also not, we don't believe, about just me and God, although that relationship is paramount and we need to obviously spend time with God, and we looked at that in that series of spiritual practices. But ultimately it's not just about me and God, it's also about me, God and my family. And so much of the Bible becomes irrelevant if you don't have the family, because it's about relationship. It's also not primarily about creating a teaching seminar, although we want to do good teaching and we value the Bible and so on. But that's not our primary aim. Above all else, it's about deepening relational connection to the Father, to the Son and the Spirit, and to one another. So I'm going to just remind ourselves of Paul's picture of the body of Christ. And I thought, well, he actually uses this more than once, so I'm not going to use the famous Corinthians one. This is taken from Ephesians chapter 4. He says, "So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up, until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we'll no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow up to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work." Wow, that's just an amazing picture. And what it shows us is that maturity and growth comes through that community, that body, and each part playing each part of the body doing its work. So, this relational connection and building of community that we want in the Vineyard is, I think, probably under threat. More now probably in my time of life as we are now than it's ever been before. And I think there are a number of reasons why deepening community life is hard for us. So I've got a few. They all begin with I, actually. This is threats to relationship. The first is individualism. We know that, the sense of belonging to community generally is broken down. Certainly in Western culture, not so much in other cultures, but in the West, in Europe and the USA and so on. We've become individualists, and we look to ourselves to provide ourselves with our meaning and purpose, much less so than who we are as part of a community. So individualism and that sense of it's all about me and who I am and finding myself is a great threat to community, even though we've seen the effect it's had, in rampant mental health, illness and so on, that has come because of this trend towards individualism. That's also fueled isolation. There's more loneliness and isolation in our society now than there's ever been before. People are actually hungering for community, but they're frightened of it. That's the problem. They're frightened of what it might mean. So there's a lot of isolation. Then there's that dreaded thing called IT. It had to begin with an I, you see. So, but information technology generally, as we've seen that, and the internet and social media and all the rest of it, it's sort of encouraged us into virtual relationships, which are never the same. They're just superficial and shallow and on the surface, and they never get to that deep level of connection that we need. So we've become content with a kind of pseudo community and pseudo relationship in so many ways, and also the IT and social media stuff has often portrayed. We like to portray ourselves in the perfect life, don't we? It's all about how life's so wonderful for me. We don't sort of put on social media the stuff that's rubbish in our lives, and so we all think, we've got this ideal to live up to somehow. This perfect life that I can't attain, and therefore I'll just withdraw from it. So there's all of that social media stuff going on. I mean, some of it's good. I don't want to say that it's all bad, but there is all the dangers that are there. Just the intensity of life. Life's just becomes so fast-paced. Our jobs are so demanding. They're demanding more and more of us, more and more of our time. We have less time to do things and to be with people. There's so much pressure on that actually, doing relationships does take time, particularly to deepen relationships, and that has fallen down the list of priorities. Sometimes because we can't help it. It's just all of those pressures of outside things that force us to be more on our own and to be working and so on. So the intensity of life, also just general increase in intolerance of difference, different people who are different to us, have different ideas. There's so much intolerance and so much trolling and slating each other off on social media that we're almost afraid to put our heads above the parapet and say who I am, because somebody's going to, put me down. And we've just become very distrustful of people. I think the trust has broken down. But we can, as a church, what my aim is that we as a family can buck all of that trend, and we can find healing relationships, deep relationships with one another. So those are the threats, and I think those are more real now than they've ever been. There's so much that's, and I think it is the enemy. The enemy's creating all of this stuff to keep us apart. He hates people to be together. He hates unity. He hates when particularly Christians are marching together in peace and brotherhood and sisterhood. He hates it. And so he's doing everything he can in our community and in our society to stop it happening and to create division and isolation. So we've got a fight on our hands. We've got to fight for community. We really have. We've got to fight for relationships. So there are just a few things that I want to bring out that what are the things that we're after as a vineyard and as a movement. And the first thing is we want to pursue relational reality. And that, most of all, is a really hard thing in our culture, to be real with one another, to be vulnerable and to be open. But community is where deep community is where we can stop pretending. We can stop putting up the masks and so on. And, it's only in deep relationships that we can be really open to one another. And for me to be real with myself sometimes. The wonderful thing about, we've been married, Helen and I, for a long time, coming up 44 years. It's 43 at the moment, it's coming up 44 later in the year. And I can't get away with very much with Helen anymore, I can't. She often knows better than me almost what I'm feeling and what I'm doing. Sometimes she'll say to me, "Are you all right? You don't see yourself," and I'm thinking, "No, I'm all right." But I haven't even realised myself that there's something up. There's something, almost deep down within me that, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of relational depth. And that's what heals us really, and it keeps us honest and makes us stop pretending with one another. Now I know we rarely get to that deep level of relationship with one another, but that's where we want to go. It helps us with accountability, it helps us with context, it helps us actually to face our shadows, because often it's those things that still need healing with us, our shadow self. I think John Mark Comer refers to that as that. And we've all got that still within us, but often it's only in community, and as we're real, that other people can see that, but we can't sometimes. Jesus warned us, didn't he, about hypocrisy and mask wearing and pretending and so on. And we just value being real. And that does mean that we want to be have integrity about all that we do. So we don't want to, in the Vineyard, we don't like hyping things up. We don't like titles, we don't like Pastor so-and-so. Don't ever call me Pastor so-and-so, because I'm just one of you. We're together. We don't like promoting ourselves or pretending that God's doing things that he's not and all of that stuff. It's about being honest and being real. So that's what we want to pursue, and this isn't easy. And a lot of the time, we feel, this is going to make me vulnerable to be real, and it is. But if we can do it, it's worth it. Secondly, we want to say that personhood is defined not just by who I am or who I think I am, but it's defined within community. That's part of what Paul was saying. He says that you find who you are, whether he talks about various roles in the church, but he says those come in the context of being part of the body. Our culture's mantra is that you'll find who you are, you'll find contentment from within yourself. Be true to who you are. You'll find yourself, and then you'll be happy. There's some truth in that, but actually the biblical view is that we find ourselves in relationship to God, Father, first and foremost, but also within a body, within a community. It's the hand and the foot only have true meaning when they're part of the body. That's who they find out who they are and what their purpose is. If this hand is just wandering around on its own, like the Addams family hand, it's not really who it's meant to be. It's not. It's just on its own, and it's not part of who it really is. So we don't find ourselves solely from a personal quest and reaching deep inside of us to find out who I am. It always interests me that in the Bible, when somebody's named, they're always the son or daughter of something. It's never Simon the fisherman. It's Simon, son of John. It always puts it in a relationship. That's what I'm trying to say. It puts it into a relationship context. It's not about who they are by what they do. It's about community. That's the whole of the biblical sort of message is about who am I in relation to others? Who am I in community? I think I might have a quote here. Yeah. So church really is a community of birth, discovery, growth, equipping and empowerment through the quality and longevity of our relationships. I think that was a good quote. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for long-lasting, quality, deep relationships, and that enables us to find out who we are, discovery, birth, equipping, and so on. I would say that for me, that's my story. I've come to be the person that I am through lots of other people who've mentored me, encouraged me, challenged me sometimes, but drawn out of what was in me. I was, in my teenage years, was a very, very shy person. I would rarely speak to anybody, or I couldn't do much because I was so shy. It was chronic shyness, really, and you can tell that's not quite me now. I'm still introverted, but people saw some of the things that God had put within me, and encouraged me to lead a Bible study for a start, or whatever, just drawing that stuff out, encouraging me, telling me where I got it wrong, and I'm still getting it wrong, but just that whole investment of somebody within me to make me where I am today. And that's carried on through loads of different vineyard pastors, Anglican pastors, friends, community groups, small groups, and so on. So it is truly, when it's done well, it can be a community of birth, discovery, growth, equipping and empowerment. As people often see in us something that we never see in ourselves, we both, Helen and I, are passionate about drawing the gold that is in all of you, because you all have it, because God promises it. So we want to continue to try and draw out the gold within you, and we've not always been very good at it, but we want to get better. And linked to that is that the church functions in relationship. That's part of what Paul's picture about the body is all about, that the church functions through relational contexts and through support. And he talks about that network of ligaments he talks about, doesn't he, in that bit in Ephesians there. So everything we want to do, we want to do it relationally, whether that's worship, whether it's ministry times, whether it's serving together. One of the great things about doing Grow Baby is we just serve together. We go through the highs and lows of that together, the difficulties, the pain sometimes, and stress. But it's all building relationship when we serve together. So that's why we love to worship corporately together. It's not about whoever happens to be at the front. It's about us joining together to worship God. So we want to do everything. The church functions properly in relationship, and where everybody is playing their part, and we all matter. You matter as much as I do, and that's what I want to say this morning. That our future is a future together, and it's a future as we work together and draw ourselves forward and encourage one another. And we all bring something to the mix. So that in itself is a revolutionary force, I think, in our self-centred, isolated culture, that we are a place where we can find where we belong, we can find purpose, we can find meaning, we can find a role, and we're all wired to need that in as part of how God has made us. So, this is a Wimber quote. The depth of our experience of church is determined by the quality of our relationships. I think that's true. Wimber always said that there are many reasons why people go to a church, but the reason that they stay is always relationship, because they've made some friends and they're being supported. So where we've not been as good at that as we should have, I apologise. We'll try and get better. And in all of this, of course, what is really key is that we create a safe place. We want to create in the Vineyard a place that is an environment of love and acceptance and forgiveness. Even when we get it wrong, and we do, we all get it wrong at times, and we do things and say things that we think, why did I do that, or why did I say that? But even through that, we want to create a place of love and acceptance, to know that doesn't affect the core identity of who you are as loved people and loved by us as your pastors. So we do love as we share feelings, as we self-disclose. One of the great things you can do in love is to give of yourself. Give yourself away to each other. And we want to do that in an environment that is, excuse me, is where you don't fear. I mean, fear is the great enemy of this, really. It's where you don't fear being judged or labelled or gossiped about or psychoanalysed. We don't want you to have any fear of any of that. Fear is the thing that breaks down a safe place and stops self-disclosure because we fear rejection. That's often how it is. Often our thought is, I don't really like myself. Therefore, if I self-disclose, no one else will like me either. And therefore, I just won't, so I'll hide and pretend and all the rest of it. But I think that healing and growth comes as we're prepared to be vulnerable with one another, as we're prepared to admit where we struggle, to ask for help. That's often one of the things that we find hardest. That pride kicks in and think, I've got to have it all together. And you haven't got to have it all together. I haven't got it all together. So you don't have to. And when you need help, there's a body of people with gifts in this place that can help you. So never be afraid to ask for help. And we all need that in different ways. Yeah, we do. And healing and growth comes through that, even in times when we get it wrong and we fail. So, lastly, just to close, our model in all of this is Jesus, of course. I don't know whether I've told you, but Jesus is my hero. Have I told you that recently? Yeah, if not, I should have done. Jesus, he's my hero. And I love the way that he relates to people, the way that he never exploits people, he never manipulates them, he never does it, never relates out of fear for himself or fear for his rejection. He doesn't parent people. He doesn't. He wants them to grow up and to be mature, as this Paul's picture of the body says. He's just so wonderful in the way that he's patient and kind, compassionate, forgiving. And the great encouragement to me was that Jesus had to be very patient with his disciples, didn't he? Because they were not, often the brightest bunch, or they didn't get it, or they did the stupid things, and they fight over who's going to be the chief, and who's going to take charge, and all the rest of it. And there's egos and there's pride, and he's just so patient with them, so loving, honest. Jesus had this wonderful way of not messing about with them, but being honest with them, but doing it with a heart of compassion and patience. So that's the model I want to try and emulate and follow. As Paul said in that Ephesians passage, he talked about speaking the truth to one another, but in love. Speaking the truth in love. So there is a time for speaking truth to each other, to saying, no, actually that's not right. But we do it with a heart of love. If you don't do it with a heart of love, and a heart of mercy, then we're in trouble. I remember there's a story, just closing, there's a story about Wimber once that in one of the meetings he was in, there was somebody who was prophesying, giving words, and he sensed that he was doing it just to draw attention to himself. And Wimber says in the story that he marched down towards this guy, and so he's going to obviously tell him off and stop him. And he says that suddenly God convicted him. He said, "Have you got a heart of mercy?" And he knew he hadn't. In that moment, he got no mercy for this guy. He was just going for him. And he went, so I just sat down from just then, put my head in my hands and started crying. See, because I hadn't got that heart of mercy in that way. He was probably right to go and confront this guy, but he just hadn't got the mercy for it in that moment. So it is about modelling Jesus' wonderful way of being full of grace and truth. So we are a relational movement. That's why, when we do social events and stuff, that's just as important as what we do today or anything else that we do, because we're creating relationship and community. So if you've got any great ideas about how you know, to develop relationship and create community, to do things together as a church, then do let us know, because we you know, yeah, it'd be great. So, I think I'm done.